call to order our finance meeting. We're operating under special COVID rules, which means we're doing this online. We've done it so many times, I don't think the clerk needs to read the whole statement. So with that, we'll move forward. We'll call us to order. If we could get a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Chair Miller.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Rennie.
Here.
Director Gibbons.
Here.
Director Elahi.
Javed. Unmute.
Sorry about that. Yes, present.
Thank you. And Committee Member Oberg.
Here.
Thank you. All are present.
All right. Next up is public comment on matters not on the agenda. Any member of the public may speak up to 3 minutes on any item. To indicate your desire to do so, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom, or if you've called in on the phone, you can do that by pressing *9. Hearing music, but nobody's raised their hand. Anybody send any communications into the clerk?
No communication received.
Okay, then moving right along, item number 1, approving the minutes from our January 17th meeting, which was a long time ago.
I move approval of the January 17th meeting notes.
Second by Rob.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion? I should just double check. Any member of the public wish to comment on the consent calendar? If so, indicate by raising your virtual hand. Seeing none, check with the clerk. Were there any written communications on this?
No communication received.
Okay, then we'll need a roll call vote for this.
Thank you. Chair Miller.
Aye.
Committee Vice Chair Rennie.
Aye.
Director Gibbons.
Aye.
Director Elahi.
Yes.
Committee Member Oberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries unanimously.
All right, perfect. Thank you, guys. All right, next up is our CEO update.
Thank you, Chair Miller, members of the board. I'm going to take about 5-ish minutes or so to give the Finance Committee an update on our strategic plan process. And so far, I've updated the full board on it and the executive committee. It's more in terms of process of what we are doing. And so just so you know, the board had adopted a strategic plan back in when we were formed, so somewhere in the May 2017 time period. So it's been about 3 years, and every year we've made a few updates. I think overall, we have the overall picture is still great in terms of direction, but we do need to adapt to year changes and just different things that change in the environment and also internally. So next slide, please. So in terms of getting input, got input from a lot of the staff because at the end of the day, it's the staff that's right in the center of making sure that the vision and mission that we as a community want gets put into place. So I got a lot of input from the directors, managers, all staff in a variety of meetings. Also reached out to all your member communities and the staff of your cities through the MOG to get some of their input. I've made a few personal phone calls one-on-one with some of the advocates in our community who have been active in showing up at our meetings and knowing what SVCE does to get their feedback too. And I'll share with you some high-level kind of findings and that I have in slides that are to come. But what's coming up is in August and September, we'll present an update, and September, hopefully, we'll adopt the updated strategic plan. One of the key things that the board wanted me to do was make it a shorter plan. The previous plan had the strategic plan and a work plan kind of combined into one. And we want to kind of separate the two so that the work plan would be synced up with the strategic plan. The strategic plan should really be kind of strategic, but that the board can kind of look at and really read at one sitting versus it being kind of like a long chapter in a book. All right, next slide, please. So here's what I have kind of summarized as to identified major issues. First, I'm just calling working in COVID times, and it actually started before that. There are some real concerning hotspots, I would say, in terms of workload within SVCE. We've reached a stage where there's some burnout issues that we have in terms of just the number of things that we are working on. So I see that as kind of being a risk to us. At the same time, there are also opportunities that we are managing. And I think the board has been very supportive in terms of how do we manage in these COVID times in terms of work. Next blue box is operations evolution. So we are a new agency, right? So we're just 3 years old. We are moving from planning, from ideas to planning to operations. And you're going to see that, right? So, and you're seeing it right now where, say, CRCR, the customer relief programs, laying out a bunch of stuff on resiliency. Heat pump water heater program has gone to 2.0. We've done the Data Hive, which is basically a pilot innovation program that allows contractors to get access to customer data in 90 seconds. Well, all that's going to get translated into actual programs that will be expanded. The Cali VIP program, you match $6 million to $6 million coming from the state. Well, to get that, we had to write a grant application. But in the next year, we actually have to do stuff with that. So there's a lot of doing that's going to come up. And it's not just in programs, it's also in power supply. Andrea, could you just flip to the next slide and we'll come back to this? I just wanted to tell you about power supply and kind of the idea of going from an idea planning to operations. The board has approved $1 billion worth of long-term contracts. Well, that first one of those long-term contracts are going to come online in summer. With these contracts, we are going to save money. We're going to be saving millions of dollars. But at the same time, it's going to require more work from us to manage and optimize those contracts because now they're operational, stuff we didn't have to do before. So we're going to actually have to put in new resources in terms of people and contractors to operate these contracts. And these are just the first 7. You're going to see a lot more coming up in the next 24 months. So go back to the previous slide. So that's the operations evolution that we're going through. The next is ad hoc systems. When we started very quickly with about 5 employees, but now we are 29 employees and I'm requesting 2 more that'll come up. Well, it's not just HR and finance. We basically need to move from an ad hoc systems to an enterprise kind of wide system. And so it's in the areas of energy risk management, data governance, and analytics that we have a lot of ad hoc systems that are just not going to work going into the future. I did get input from advocates and also from staff about how, going to the next blue box, about really as we become a larger organization, as we become more complex, we work on a lot more projects with a lot more reach. We need to be focusing on outcomes and key results so that you as a board can really take your oversight responsibilities. You can carry out your oversight responsibilities effectively. And from a staff standpoint, we can prioritize effectively so we don't reach burnout. And so basically metrics, a lot more metrics that will be measured on. The next one is equity. And equity is basically how do we reach out to parts of our population that have been underserved. And it's a moment of time in our country that has changed in the last 3 and 4 months. And though we have planned around equity programs, we really want to put more resources into both the planning and implementation of programs with an equity lens to it. So we started this through hiring an intern last year. She's now left, but one of the new positions that Amy is hiring for right now will have about half that person's time focused on equity. And so that's a new kind of deal that we'll be working on, which we haven't done much of in the past. So that was an issue that was identified. Community and customers, and this is under a COVID regime, right? How do we do customer outreach? You know, at community outreach, we have a couple of people who we would go out and be in the community. All that's changed and will be changing in the future. I also got feedback from members of the community about, you know, how do you leverage the power of elected officials? We have 13 of you on our board, but we have close to 70 on each of the city councils. How do we actually leverage? I mean, CCA is a publicly governed organization. How do we leverage the power of electeds? And then also the last bullet is like there was a feedback about maybe SVCE needs to do more in terms of being a leader and leaning into decarbonization efforts with our agencies. So being more of pushing versus being more passive. So something more, you know, like what we did on the reach codes, but doing more of that on, you know, the overall building space and the EV space, etc. So based on this, I've summarized 5 changes that we need to adapt to. And so, Andrea, if you can skip 2 slides and go to the last slide. Yeah. So this is so when I think about the big picture for the board, how are we adapting to the changes that I talked about? One is additional resources and efficiencies. If we need more resources, I see resources coming in 3 ways. One is, and it's an and, it's not either or. You increase headcount, more FTEs, you get more consulting and contractor help, and then you prioritize, you increase internal efficiencies, and you basically do more with less, and also get rid of projects that may be of low value. It was kind of interesting as we went through this, there were very few projects that people wanted to stop. That really aren't. We're such a new agency that, you know, what we're doing, people want to continue. The other thing we need to really focus on is enterprise-wide systems, metrics, and tools for power supply, data analytics, and HR and finance. Third is a focus on equity. We need to lean more into having an equity lens for our programs. Number 4 is a digital pivot. When it comes to customer and community engagement, digitization and reaching out to customers through digital means is the way of the future. And then community outreach and leverage. We need to leverage the power of electeds and also what is our role in being more of a leader when it comes to each of our individual cities versus being more passive. So these are the 5 things that we have so far. Continue to fine-tune it and present it to the board, the exec committee board, as part of our strategic plan. So, any questions on this?
Girish, I have one small question, and
Yes, please.
it's really just when we do this discussion, it's that timeline slide that I just love that has the
Yeah.
whole year.
I'll add that in.
I just think there's sort of an anchor slide for everybody, and that's kind of the anchor
Perfect.
slide. Here's the process. Here's where we are. Here's why you're seeing this today.
Yeah.
Especially new people starting in January. Liz.
So, am I here? Yeah. Very good presentation, very concise. It also, for me, connected with the whole budget discussion that's going to be following. So I liked that a lot. My question is, what of this presentation are you going to do for the board as a whole? Because I think it's very beneficial, but what your thoughts are.
I love your input either right now or I can follow up with a phone call to you.
But I think the board would benefit from that presentation.
Okay, we have it teed up for the August board meeting next week.
Okay, so it's a good one.
Yeah, I'll add Howard's slide, a great idea. I think that connects the whole annual process of connecting various things, the budget and evaluation and looking at this. Yep. All right, I don't see any other questions, so I'll hand it back to the chair.
All right, so that's our whole CEO report.
Yes.
We will move forward with selection of chair and vice chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair Miller. So this group was reappointed back in February and we haven't met since. So for 2020, we would like to open the floor for a appointment of chair and vice chair for 2020. With that, open to your discussion or nominations.
Okay. Hey, Rob, you're the vice chair. Are you willing to serve as chair?
I will, but I would also like to see if Director Elahi would be interested in chair too. I think he's
Unmute, Javed.
muted.
Yeah, I could go vice chair, but Rob, you'd be doing us a favor by stepping up as chair.
All right, fine.
Then I would nominate, well, Liz.
Can we have a discussion first, please?
Well, we haven't made any nominations, so there's just nominations and discussions and discussions. And go ahead, Liz.
Okay, so my question is, on this board, we're only going to have one transition person of the 5 of us, right? You're the only one that won't be coming back.
Right.
Okay. And so I guess my question is, this is, well, this is, to me, this is a awkward time to put in for chair and vice chair on this committee. I may be the only one that thinks this, and that's fine. But I'm just wondering if all of our appointments and things are going to change in January, whether we wouldn't be better just to continue the board as is until the transitions in January, or this committee in January. I don't know. I don't remember why we ended up doing it in the June, July, now August time period. Why did we end up doing it now?
It's because we haven't had a meeting since January 17th. And so,
No, I meant
Yeah,
I meant the whole committee.
yeah, but that's what I mean. If we had had a meeting in March, we would have appointed people in March. And so, you know, we just got freeze dried with our chair and vice chair from last year because the 17th was too soon. We hadn't had all the appointments yet. And then we didn't do another meeting for 6 months.
So sorry, I may still be missing it. I read in the notes that the last time we did this, maybe I misread it. I thought the last time we appointed it was in July of 2019. So I was just asking about the cycle of June.
I think it's a question of how the finance committee meetings fall. And, you know, we will get a new permanent finance director, don't want to put on Don's shoulders, but, you know, and, you know, I am hopeful that maybe there'll be slightly more frequent meetings. And then one of those meetings should be is once we appoint everybody at the February board meeting, we have a meeting shortly thereafter. We can sort it out on a normal cycle.
Okay. Okay.
I agree with you 100%. It's just we haven't met in 6 months, and that in itself is a flaw.
So this is really chair until next January, right?
That's what I'm thinking, yes.
Yeah, we might not appoint everybody in January because I don't think we have
Or
some
February,
cities,
okay.
you know.
February, whatever.
Yeah, I think we should be more aggressive. ETA makes all their appointments and gets it over with, even if some cities say they don't appoint people till January. Well, tough. Thanks for playing. But yeah, either January or February.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. Thank you.
Not that I'm anxious to give it away, but I would, even if there's only one more meeting this year, right? And then next year I won't be at the first meeting because I'll be gone by then. So
Yeah, Howard has a lot on his plate as it is with the mayor of Saratoga and everything else.
a
And
few minor
planning
things
his
going on.
retirement.
My retirement from politics.
Hope not.
And if we get to that point, honestly, since it's like one meeting, if at that next meeting, everybody says, oh, let, Rob and Javed serve for the next year,
That's fine. Yeah.
I don't know how it all works that way, but I do think we should figure out how to have more regular finance committee meetings.
Yeah, we did for a while, but I think having regular finance committee meetings and setting up a regular routine of committee appointments would be useful for everything going forward. So I'm fine. I mean, I'd have been fine if you guys stayed the way you are until January, but if you want to make changes now, that's fine too.
Doesn't matter. So we need to pick somebody. So I nominate Rod as our chair and Javed as our vice chair.
Okay, I'll second.
Since I put them together and nobody offered any other alternate, maybe we can just do this all in one roll call vote. Any objections to that? Okay, so if we could, oh yeah, let me double check. Any member of the public wish to comment on this item? If you wish to do so, please indicate by raising your virtual hand. Seeing none, let me check with the clerk. Any other communications?
No communication received.
Seeing none, then now we'll get a roll call vote on this.
Thank you. I will start with Director Gibbons,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Elahi,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Oberg.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries for Director Rennie to serve as chair and Director Elahi to serve as vice chair of the 2020 Finance and Administration Committee.
All right.
Well done.
Y'all set here, Rob? Unmute though.
Yes. Push the wrong button. Okay. Get the video back. Get the mute. All right. So you'd like me to take over the meeting. So we are up to agenda item number 4, which is the proposed 2021 operating budget and finance review. I'll turn it over to staff to kick us off.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're here at this time. Do we have the slides up?
Just a moment. I'm having a bit of difficulty on my.
Okay. Well, I can start out. We have, we're kind of early in the budget process still. We'll show you the roadmap in just a little bit. Oh, thank you, Andrea. So this is the 2021 proposed budget. And next slide, please, Andrea. So we're going to just hit some highlights first, and then we'll go to a roadmap and we'll talk about some of the numbers. So kind of some of the big highlights, and something I usually like to start out with, just kind of give them the, the news right at once. SVCE is still financially stable, and that's a good thing. That's something to point out, especially in these times where there's many challenges. So the budget that we're going to show you has a projected ending reserve for fiscal year 2021 of $8.4 million. So again, despite the challenges from COVID, despite the challenges from increased PCIA numbers, we still end with a projected reserve of $8.4 million. On the expense side, the number 2 highlight there, energy expenses, we expect to decrease about $4.4 million because of the load loss due to COVID, and that's despite increases in resource adequacy costs. And we do have in the budget, just to highlight, a request for 2 new positions for a power analyst and a data scientist, and we have a slide on that we can look at in more detail in a few slides. And then finally, as far as the highlight goes, the budget that we're going to show you does assume, and this is kind of key, does assume a decrease of the discount from PG&E from the 4% that we're discounted now in this fiscal year to a 1% discount to help offset the increase in the PCIA costs, and also to help retain the Moody's credit rating. They saw that as a credit positive, having that percentage move like that. So we thought that was important to include in here, but certainly want the committee's feedback. Next slide, please. So wanted to make sure to get the roadmap slide in here so we can see where we are. Kind of number one on the road there, I wanted to point out that we first looked at 2021 fiscal year numbers back at the end of June. Don Eckert, before he left, he gave a presentation to the exec committee at that point, trying to giving an overview of what things would look like in the next year. And so we've kept many of the assumptions. We're still right on target, so we've kept them largely the same. The numbers have adjusted a little bit, but many of the assumptions are the same, and we'll talk about those assumptions. So here we are, step number 2 on the road. I'm going to talk to the Finance Committee, and we're hoping for your input and feedback so we can make this a better budget and a better presentation, because next week we're going to go to the full board and give largely the same presentation to the full board to get their feedback as well, in order to move on then to budget adoption in the September board meeting. And then after that, or kind of simultaneous with that, would be the strategic plan, as Girish mentioned earlier, is being looked at and hopefully could be adopted in the September, October timeframe as well. And then we don't want to forget further down the road that we do early next calendar year, have a mid-year budget review. That's always key when you have a industry like this where they can be kind of volatile and things can change. So we want to make sure to take another look at where the budget numbers are in February and March in case things have changed. So that's kind of the roadmap. Next slide, please. So let's start off with some of the key assumptions. These are always good to review so you know what underlies the numbers that we're going to be looking at. One thing, and this is something that you know well, there's always trade-offs in an organization like this. You know, we want to get the best value for our customers, our ratepayers, as we possibly can. But at the same time, we need to stay sustainable. We want SVCE to remain a strong, fiscally strong organization well into the future. So that's always the balancing act there. And that's why we've got the 1% discount built into the budget now. It's balancing that. How do we still provide value to our customers, but at the same time, keep fiscally strong. And then the next box over, the PCI rate I mentioned, we do. We still expect that. It's near as I can tell, nobody really knows for sure. So we're taking our best estimate based on information that we have, and it looks like in the fall timeframe that the PCI rate will go up a large amount. We've actually got a 44% increase built into this budget, which would take us to 5 cents per gigawatt in October, and then reduce back down in 2021 to under 4 cents in 2021. So that's the best information we have right now, but that's really unknown. If things change there, you would obviously want to look at things differently. But that's a big piece of the assumptions that are underlying the numbers that we're looking at. Another one is the retail load, and that is load loss because of COVID. As we've talked about before, and as Don Eckert shared at the end of June, there is significant load loss, especially from our commercial and industrial customers, particularly the smaller C&I customers, and less so in the larger ones. And on the residential side, it's actually because more people are home and working from home. There's actually a little bit of an increase in load there. So altogether, we have built into the model kind of a double dip model just to be fiscally conservative, showing the dip that we experienced earlier on and then lessening, and then possibly in the fall and the winter, a second dip, maybe not quite as big as the first one, but we did want to be on the conservative side as far as projecting what load loss might look like. So that's built into the numbers we'll look at too. And as I think I mentioned on PG&E rates, who knows there? We don't have any changes to PG&E rates themselves built into the model. So we're assuming that's going to stay the same for the year. But of course, that's why we want to make sure to meet again at mid-year in order to look at things and see if that needs to be updated. And then a smaller risk, but just on the bad debt side, we've always historically had very low bad debt, but we still, from those that we've talked to, it looks like it could go up 3 to 4 times. So when we've got about 0.25% bad debt in the past, so we've got into the budget roughly a percentage point as far as what might be losses due to bad debts because of people's, maybe their inability to pay in some cases lately. Okay, and next slide, please. So here's a very high level summary of the numbers and some of the key points that are going to budget, just so that we can get these numbers into our head and get a feel for it. On the energy revenue side, we're projecting, and just so you know, we've worked very closely hand in glove with Monica's Power Resources group, looking at these numbers in order to make sure that we're all on the same page. And Monica and her team have been, tremendously helpful in a very short time for us. So these energy revenues, we're projecting a little over $264 million. Next year, that's actually down $22 million from what we expect in the current year, which was $286 million. So that's where some of that load loss comes from, we talked about. So that's the load reduction. The energy costs also come down a little bit, as I mentioned, about 4.4 million. So that's $234 million roughly in energy costs for the new fiscal year is what we're projecting. We're well hedged in this current fiscal year and over 80% hedged in the following year, 2021. So in order to reduce risk. So that leaves us with an operating margin of $29.7 million. That's about 11%. So that seems to me like a pretty good margin in these economic times. Now, I understand if you've been with the agency a while that we've seen much higher margins in the past, some years more than 30%, I hear. So this may not seem like as much, but I think given the challenge of the times, a $29 million operating margin is pretty good. And that we would use to fund operations, kind of the non-energy part of operations, and our reserves and the programs, the 2% from the programs and our capital program. So out of that operating margin then comes, there's about $16 million for operations of the various different departments, for employee costs and for consulting costs. Now that $16 million, that's offset some by expected interest income of about 1.2 million. So the actual operations costs are over 17 million. And then about 5.3 million for programs. This is the 2% formula based on energy sales. So about 5.3 million would go towards programs. And that leaves the reserve of 8.4 million. That I mentioned earlier, and if we can go to the next slide, have a chart that I think you've seen before that we've updated here. So we expect to end next fiscal year a little bit over the $150 million mark in reserves, about $154 million, which, so with the adding $8.4 million to the reserve, if the budget stays the way it is now, and of course with costs being lower, it makes the days of cash on hand a little bit better. So it works out to about 219 days of cash on hand, which is terrific, and that's a good security blanket to have going into challenging times. The rating agencies love to see something like that, and it's well within our policy as well, which works out from 180 days is good, 270 days is kind of the top of the policy. So we're nowhere near the top, but I think it's a good place to be. It goes up a little bit in 22 as we're kind of working our way out of the COVID costs, and out of the PCI cost increases, and then more after that in 2023. So that's a little bit on we are in cash reserves. This is a really important tool for the budget, given how new the agency is, and given how volatile risks can be between PG&E rates, between economic downturns like we've just experienced, between where the PCIA charge could go, all of those risks, or direct access where that may go in the future with some of our commercial customers. This is really our main tool for making sure that we stay fiscally sound going forward. Okay, next slide, please. So we have one slide here to give a little bit more definition around the new positions. As Girish mentioned earlier in the talk about our strategic plan, we're becoming a more complex organization. In my entire 3-week experience here with SVCE. I can see that already. It's an organization that started out very small and very nimbly, and still is. But there are pieces that are coming together that are making things more complex. And in order to stay on top of that and do that well and not burn out staff, these are some of the things that we're thinking about. In the future state, we're hoping for approval of a new power analyst that would work with our power resources department, primarily providing analytical support for some of the complex PPA negotiations that go on, evaluating new resources and making sure our energy portfolio is optimized and the risk is well balanced. And then a data scientist in the, it would work in the decarbonization department, but would really be an agency-wide resource to help manage the large amounts of data that we work with and in order to optimize our performance and mitigate risk there. So that's a little bit on the new positions. And finally, I think the last slide. Yeah, so last slide, we just saw this just to kind of go back to the beginning. Our next steps would be next week, taking the proposed budget to the board, the full board, with any input or advice or directions or input on the presentation itself that you have for us this evening. We very much welcome that. And then at the September board meeting, we would hope for adoption there. So that's a couple of the next steps. And I believe that's all the slides I had for you this evening. Is there another slide, Andrea? Of course, yes, a thank you slide. So I'm happy to help answer any questions and turn it back over to the chair.
Let's go to see if questions before we go to the public. Liz, I see you. Go ahead with your hand. Make sure you unmute first, please.
Okay, thank you. I said we're going to have to adapt a little bit. This group is usually a bit more of a free-flowing discussion, so we'll have to figure out how to make that work a little bit. In terms of questions, I think basically, I think in the, so you want to do questions first as opposed to just general conversation?
Usually what I do is let you ask questions of staff so that it generates a little bit of discussion, and then I go to the public so they have a little bit of the benefit of the answers to our questions before they make comments, and then come back for discussion. It's the way I usually like to do it, if that's all right with the committee here.
Yeah, it's making us a little more formal than we've been in the past. That's fine. Okay, so I just have one comment, and I don't know if Don can fix it now. When you speak, you have a tremendous echo, and it's really hard to hear you. I don't know if anyone's had that problem.
It wasn't the greatest.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. I'll check into that.
Okay. Would anybody else like to ask questions before I go to the public?
I got a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Don, a lot of just the phraseology sounded sort of tentative. Was there a reason why, I get that there's a bunch of unknowns, and I get that the board hasn't approved the budget. I mean, I kind of get the framework, but it more seemed like it should have been statements of here's what we're doing and here's what we need, rather than there was sort of this tentative, like if it's approved, if this is what we want, if the world doesn't change out from under us. Is there something I'm missing in the tone?
No, that's good feedback. I'm used to talking to city councils, and when we bring a budget, we don't as staff bring the budget saying this is what we're going to do. We bring a budget saying this is what we propose, this is what we plan to do, but we're certainly looking for input. So if there was any tentative sounding in there, that's part of it. The other part of it may be just my short tenure. That may be part of it as well. But yeah, we're really looking for input. So I didn't want to make it sound like, you were trying to railroad this particular plan. but I appreciate the feedback.
No, I was worried there was something else. I mean, we all know the risks but you said it like 4 times or something where, you know, assuming this doesn't go bad or that doesn't blow up or this stays and so then I start thinking, uh-oh, are they really worried that something is shaky in this whole thing? And I'm gathering that this is normal business and this is our normal budget process and everybody's our normal level of comfort, which includes a normal amount of discomfort. So
Yes, I would say the level of discomfort is normal. And if I express it as being more than normal, that's good feedback as well. Yeah, this being my first presentation, I'm not completely clear on how much you've been let in on what all the risks are. It sounds like you've been well versed on that. So that's good feedback too. Thank you.
you may scare a few board members, but I think you're okay.
All right, so let's go ahead, Director Alahi.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think the echo may have to do with if a speaker is on at the same time. I'll turn my speaker off. I was looking at some more specificity, if you have it, like on the retail load, you said there'll be a double dip recovery. I don't know if you can estimate what the percentage of the dip is going to be or the revenue loss is going to be. And then I would also probably like to see a revenue slide as to how our revenue has come in for the last 3 years, so that we can kind of compare it. We're going to be adding some more overhead, and I'm trying to figure out if the overhead is related to the increased revenues we have or the increased complexities we have. So that may be helpful.
Okay. We do have a couple of slides that give a little more details on the load loss. If you'd like to look at them now, or I could add that in next week.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I don't know if I missed you saying that you're going to do a revenue slide or not.
Yes, we can add in more details. Yeah, this was more high level. We can add in a more detailed slide with 3 years of revenues next week. Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
Rob, you're muted.
Thank you. I muted just in case when I'm chair, I like to leave it open, but people are complaining about echoes. So I thought it could be me leaving it open. So, so let me open the public comment. We have 2 attendees. Do either of them wish to say anything, Andrea?
No, Chair, none of our attendees via Zoom, and I did not receive any communication.
Okay, thank you. So then I'll just come back to the committee for more comments, questions, discussion. Go ahead, Liz. After unmuting.
Thank you. I'm trying to work several things at once. So I went through the staff report, and so I had a couple of comments in terms of presentation, and your presentation may have answered some of them, but I didn't want to lose track of them. You talk about on the staff report under analysis and discussion, you've got expense, and you've talked about energy expense is projected to be blah, 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 or 1.8% decrease. And this may go to Javed's point. And then the next one is operating expenses, a 9.4% increase. I would just offer a little, if somebody is reading that, and again, your presentation helps with it. If you read 1.8% decrease and then the 9.4 increase, you don't realize, I guess you do now that I'm looking at it, but it's 1.8% of the 2.34 million, and it's 9.4% of the 16.8 million. I guess I would say if there's almost too much information there.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That was my reaction to it, because you read it at any rate. That was my reaction. So in the staff report, you can, just so when you make your presentation, you don't provide too much information.
Okay.
Let's see. Why are the green prime revenues going down? What's the assumption on that?
Um, we carried over, I'm sorry.
Don, if you want, anytime you want me to address something, like, feel free to ask. That's a little bit inside baseball.
Okay, yeah, if you want to jump in there, that's fine.
Yeah, it's some of our green prime cities, as part of the budget change, have moved to 100% carbon free through their Green Start program. That's the major change.
Okay, all right, so that's not unsurprising. Okay, and there was one other thing a month or two ago, whenever we talked, there was the problem of repaying or buying back the excess solar power, and that the checks, instead of being $1,000 or even $5,000, they were going up substantively. Have we factored in? I didn't see any discussion about buying more energy from solar systems that aren't being utilized because buildings and schools are vacant.
Yeah, we are not factoring that into the budget because the board's policy is to cap it at $5,000. So that's pretty much what we've done.
Right.
And our expectation is in the next year, they will use up those excess credits. If they don't, we'll have to come back to you. So this is why we come back to you with the mid-year budget.
Okay.
And an overlay on this, Liz, is what we call NEM 3.0, which is the net energy metering policy. The state as a whole has gone through 2 large strategic changes on those policies. And the whole state as a whole is looking at what that third strategy is going to look like. And so I think we'll factor that into what you brought up. So those customers who have over-generated and they're above the cap, if you've approved a NEM 3.0 policy, we'll most likely factor that in through that.
Okay, good. I just don't want to make sure we weren't losing track of it because there was such a amount of money.
Yep.
Let's see. Funding to support the process to obtain. Forgive me, I don't remember. Why are we going for a second credit rating?
So the second credit rating is and we plan to do this only in 2021, not right away.
Okay.
And the reason being, each of the credit rating agencies look at us a little differently. They use different sets of metrics. And we thought having one more, it's kind of a little bit of insurance for us. That's all it is.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's critical, because all our PPAs, when you think about what they need in terms of credit, they only require one credit agency. So this is a little bit of, it's not the highest priority and not the most critical, but we've put it into our budget. I would expect that if we stop this process, it will only be sometime in like February, March of 2021 would be the only.
So I guess my observation, I thought the staff report was very good, had a lot of detail, and it's typical. I ask questions, and as I read through, I find the answers, which I think is great. That's high praise from me, in case you don't know that, Don. I just think that I'm wondering if we need a little more detail in the presentation. And this is kind of a judgment call. There's a lot of detail in the staff report, so I don't want you to be all open up to a lot of questions at the board meeting. So that's where I was responding to Garesh's presentation in the beginning. It says, for example, support program initiatives, including piloting of CNI offerings, long-term contracts, Green Prime Direct, and all of that. There's a lot of detail in there, which is all good in the staff report. I'm just wondering if maybe, if anybody else thought that might be helpful to have a little more detail in the staff presentation. So some board members, it's important to provide enough detail. This is your presentation was very good overview, and it was an efficient use of time. But sometimes a little, I'm going to say, personality put into the conversation. might be helpful. So that's just a first time around observation. Let's see. Campaigns from the status of news. Oh, at some point, we need an update on the status of the new space. Because there's quite a bit in here about transferring money and stuff that I found a little confusing. Let's see, and the DAISY 2 program, which, let's see here. And then let's see, capital expenditures on page 2 of 3, interfund transfer and others. So I thought this was something that probably could use a little more emphasis in the presentation, which is the relationship to COVID. I know you've mentioned it, but I think I thought it could come through a little bit more specifically due to COVID-related construction delays and so on. So there wasn't much in the presentation about this whole capital expenditure, interfund transfer and others. Because I put a note here. It said I was missing the connection to the 8.3 million. It says the proposed operating shows a reduction of 8.3 million, and then so forth. I just couldn't make the connection of where the 8.3 was from that. And I think that was it. I was just my comments are minor. The information is clearly here. It's just what we talk about here has always been how we might help the board understand it a little bit more readily. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. And just since it's a big number, that reduction of 8.3 million in kind of that capital and interfund transfers, that's because in the current fiscal year, we have the CRCR money that was set aside, and we don't have that in the new fiscal year. So that's what created a reduction in that category. But I can spell that out more clearly. Thanks for that input.
It's just, you know, these are big numbers, and we're comparing a little bit of different numbers in different places. And when you percentages, you go, how come it's that and not that? Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Okay, Howard, you're next up.
Sure. You know, I'm sort of torn. The presentation was a little bit on the light side, but when I think about the board, I think that it may be very appropriate. So Liz, I'm a little worried about spending too much time on some other details because I think half of the board is like, they're not even reading all the details in the staff report already. And so it was a little bit on the light side in terms of some details. And then I just wanted to reiterate what I said before. Assertive is the wrong word, but I think we know the business that we're in. We understand that there are risks. And so you could probably do the whole presentation with a little less hedging and a few less caveats of here's what we think is going on. These are the risks. This is our shot, right? We always do a mid-year. The finance guys hate to plan for a mid-year, but you know, here's what we're going in with, and this is what we think is right, and here's the staffing that we think is necessary to support the mission. And you know, we're all about the mission. We're all about the strategic plan. We're all about this process that Grish is going to show the nice chart on. And the budget is just one step along the way of fulfilling that mission for the year. And so I understand the city council dynamic and you know, we sort of have the same dynamic, but I think just be pure of heart. This is what we're doing. This is our best estimate. This is what we think we need to do what we're doing. And are there any questions? Otherwise, it sounds like we're worried that there's something really off. And there were supplemental slides too, Liz. I don't know if you downloaded the presentation, but there was, yeah, there were some good supplemental slides, and I'm assuming all of that will be there for the board too. Anyway, it was a little bit light, but honestly, I think you struck a good tone for most of the board members, and some of us finance junkies were probably craving a little bit more. But I thought it was good.
Kirish, you had comments?
Yeah, thank you. So I was actually going to talk about the supplemental slides because one of the supplemental slides addresses Javad's question on the forecast and how we expect load to come back. We are assuming a W recovery. And Javad, we will follow up with you on the revenue. We'll give you a buzz too. So we'll get the answer to you on the revenues, but also get your input on how best to present it. We have some, we have additional charts that we thought we'll just leave it as supplemental. And if any of you have some suggestions on maybe pulling that into the main, I'll be happy to look at that.
I just realized I didn't go past the thank you. So I did miss those.
And all right, I'll make a couple comments, I guess. I didn't see the supplemental slides, so maybe I'm not sure what I missed. When I was reading a staff report, the thing that I felt was missing was where are we in our reserve band? You know, I've been here from the beginning, and for me, the bottom line finances have always been filling up those reserves. How much can we contribute each year and get to that target point? And when we started off, it looked like we were going to get there in, you know, less than 2 years, and we were going to soon be over the top of our band. And then the world changed, and the forecast changed, and then we didn't get. After 2 years, we still weren't at even the target. And then it's, you know, our next forecast said, okay, we're going to get there in the next year. We're going to be way over it. And then midway through.
But Rob, we changed the system, right? It's sort of a 3-band system. And there's like that minimum band, the desired band in the middle, and then there's that upper range. And there was a whole chart. I don't know if you want to put it back up, Don, but there was a whole chart that said that we were in the target range already, you know, with the 2020 and then 2021, which we're doing now, we're going to be over the top of the target range.
And I see that, and that was in the presentation, but I didn't see it in the report. So I was trying to remember.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And because you know, the amount we were going to contribute kept changing. You know, we forecast out a couple years, we're going to be there in 18 months. Oops. You know, a year later, well, we're not going to be there when we said it's now going to take another year. Oops, now it's going to take another year and a half. And so we've gotten there, but the point I was leading to is the contributions keep going down. The trend line doesn't look so good. You know, even in the report, it says last year this year we're supposed to contribute 20 million, and now we're talking about contributing 8 million. And last year this year I think we probably started at 35 or something like that, so it got changed to 20. Last year we were talking about contributing 50, and it got changed to 35. I don't have the numbers exactly right, but my point is we keep seeing, you know, this trend line that's headed for the dirt, and you're forecasting in the 2022 adding some more to it, but that's what we did in the previous years. We forecasted we were going to get there, yet everything, you know, the trend line just continued down, less and less contribution. You know, this year it was less than last year, and then mid-year we adjusted down, and then the next year it's even below that, and then what's going to happen mid-year. So, you know, those of us that have been around for a while might start to worry that we're running out of margin before we hit the ground here. And one good point is we are at our target band, and so we can afford to go underground a little bit. But that's just something that I start to worry about. It was one thing when the margins were, or the contribution was decreasing. Now the contribution's getting very close to zero, and and so we've assumed we're going to be able to contribute a little more next year. But like I said, the assumptions keep changing on us. What are we going to do if these assumptions continue in the same trend line? That may be a question for Girish.
Yeah. So the great question. I think you captured the history, which is we came in at the right time, Rob, where we had very large margins. And you're exactly right. Initially, we thought 2 years, 2.5 years, and then we've taken more time to reach our target. The phenomenal point we have place we are in right now is we've hit our target. That's why we've got the credit rating from Moody's. However, and this is exactly the point as to why we are proposing a 1% discount, because that's what Moody's is looking for. And in order to keep that credit rating, that's our recommendation. So we are at 8 million. A neighboring CCA looked at their 5-year forecast. 4 out of the next 5 years, they're going to be dipping into reserves. So your point about what happens if some of the uncertainties manifest, I think you have a few options. And because we have these reserves, you have options and you don't have to react immediately. So you are in an amazingly good place. And the 2 ways you would do that is you would, if you want to maintain the discount, you could dip into reserves. 2 of the Bay Area CCAs are now at 3% and 6% higher than PG&E. And several other CCAs are at like 0.5% and 1% under PG&E. So us going to 1% is kind of discount. So take reserves down. The second option, which is pretty easy to do, and I think from a mission standpoint is also okay, is reduce your carbon-free purchases. Now, that may not get you to the 100% carbon-free, but remember, our carbon-free right now is not bringing any new resources. So those are the kinds of things that you would have to struggle with if you get some negative financial things you have to deal with.
Okay, thank you. Liz, you had your hand up again?
Yes, thank you. So I found this a very helpful discussion because I would say that the level of detail in the staff report isn't reflected in the slide presentations. And not necessarily that it needs to match perfectly, but the conversations that you've just had with why are we doing this? You know, it says, you know, I guess what I'm going to say is remembering that this is going into effect in October. Our budget is going into effect in October. We are going to be transitioning to the 1%, which will allow us to have these margins and maintain these margins. So it has a lot to do, Don, just simply with familiarity and getting used to, I'm going to say ad-libbing, filling in a little bit of the connection between the budget and what the board understands and is looking for. So thought that the comments made by people were very, very good. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's probably the easiest way to phrase it. Adding in some of these connectivities about where the budget was and where it's going and why it's still good, and the flexibility that we have in the future to make adjustments when we need is kind of very, very helpful. So good conversation.
I do have another question. In one of your slides, you mentioned 16 million in operations is, I guess, after your, well, you had an operating number and then you had another 16 million you removed from that. What are the details of that 16 million? Is that our staffing? That's our staffing cost, right? And is that our staffing cost?
Yes, a lot of that is. Andrea, could you go to slide 12?
And let me just finish the rest of that is the question. Is that an ongoing staffing cost? When we started off a couple years ago, I think of that as part of the operations. To me, that's operations aside from buying energy. And that was insignificant compared to the amount of profit we're making. Now that number's twice the number of our profit. So it starts to become a bigger deal to think about what's in that number. And is that an ongoing 16 million, or is there some special things in there this year that might not be there next year if we need to remove them?
I would say it's largely ongoing. The 16 million was a combination. Again, this was me trying to summarize things. Maybe I summarized it too much because here's more of the detail like was in the staff report. The operating expenses are this $16.7 million here, which are pretty much ongoing costs. There might be some variability in them. But I netted that out against, Andrew, if you can go to the next slide, this is the rest of that chart. There's some earnings from interest income that offsets that, a little over $1 million, and then there's some capital outlay. But so I kind of netted those numbers together. Maybe I should break that out some more. Maybe that would be clearer. But for the most part, that $16 million is ongoing. It's staff, it's consultants, it's there's some variability, but it's mostly ongoing.
And I think one thing just in terms of presentation, I think you've changed the language a little bit. Obviously, you weren't here before, but we used to think of it in terms of, okay, here's our energy purchases, and then here's operations. And I think you were calling energy purchases part of operations. And I think we had separated those two terms before. And those of us who've been around for a while might get a little confused.
Okay, good to know.
Girish, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, Rob, 16 million is not the staffing costs. So 16 million was the non-operating costs, of which staffing is 6 million. And so the remaining things like, and actually, Andrea, if you can go ahead and put the same slide that Don asked you to put up, I think it's slide 12. Expand it. Yeah, if you look at this, so you see 16.7 million is the bottom line there. Staffing is 6.2 off that. The remaining is we're paying Calpine, we're paying PG&E, and professional services. So that's the majority actually. So 35%, which is 6 over about 17, 16.7, is staffing. But if you look at our overall revenue picture, we are 2.3% of our total revenues is staffing. So it's increased, but it's pretty much, I'd say in the last 2 years, that's still in that pretty low territory. And compared to other CCAs, we are on the lower end of staffing, even after the 2 positions that we are recommending to be incorporated.
And just for Don's enlightenment, you know, I've certainly brought it up, and I think others too, is, you know, we want to be a limber, efficient organization. You know, we're competing with PG&E, who everybody thinks is very bloated and bureaucratic. And so making sure we have the right staffing level is important. And so I think in the past, the previous Don has had staffing sort of separate, so it looks like a $6 million number instead of a $16 million number. And you know, and again, in my head, we're okay. I want to make sure staffing doesn't get out of control. The 6 million sounds very low, like you said. It's a small 2-3%, I think you said. Mm-hmm. But 16 is a much bigger number, and the numbers are getting swirled around a little bit from what we're used to. So just trying to catch up with this.
Good, thank you.
Let's see, who else has their hand up? Looks like Liz again.
I think, Rob, I think that was a very good comment. And I would kind of tie it into the fact why I was struggling with the percentages in my earlier comments. I think it is very important to actually connect someplace with staffing is an X percentage of our total operating costs. And there is a supplemental slide on that. And that may be something that you can say, but I think it's very important to recognize that. And it ties into Garisha's point about not wanting to burn staff out. We've been running so lean, and we're transitioning from an ad hoc enterprising organization. So that whole concept meshes together about how the budget's progressing. So I think that kind of connectivity helps. I do think that the supplemental slide with the W on it is also helpful to put into the presentation because it really clarifies why the budget's going up and down and why there are assumptions. It ties back to my comment about where does COVID fit into this? And it fits in a lot. And that one slide doesn't have to stay up long or speak too much, but it does define why it's doing the numbers are doing this craziness. So I thought that was very good. Okay, and I had one comment, and this is for future reference. When staff recommends new programs and new changes, I don't think we have ever said, and down the road, we probably will need new staff or additional staff. Because what's happening now is we're sort of having to, the first time it happened a couple meetings ago, we had to justify the transition. This time we're using very clear language about moving through the enterprise phase and needing to actually manage everything that we've now put in place. But going forward, I think it would be helpful to say, and this is another example of as these programs are implemented, we will be adding on staff, just as a bee in people's kind of thing. So that's all good. Thanks.
Okay. I do have a personnel question since we're finance and administration. Girish, did we lose Hillary? Because I think I saw that you hired a director of legislative and regulatory, which I thought was Hillary's position, but I hadn't heard she left. So
No, Hillary's position is manager of legislative and regulatory affairs. So we hired a more senior person.
Okay.
And that's a director of legislative and regulatory affairs. Hillary is very much with us.
Okay, good.
Yeah, she's very much with us. And she and Poonam are reporting to Melissa, who is actually on the call today as one of the attendees, Melissa Charles. And her first day at SVCE was on Monday.
Okay.
And,
okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just missed somewhere in all of that what was going on.
Yeah.
Javed, would you like to comment on this item? We got about 15 minutes, I think, before we're supposed to end the meeting, and we have one short item after this, it looks like.
We may have two.
Yeah,
2 items?
yeah, and I'm okay with it so far. I don't have any comments.
Okay. So this is just, so I guess we need an action item to approve this then?
Recommend approval.
I would recommend that the Finance Committee support moving forward with this budget to the board at the August meeting.
I'd second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I guess we need a roll call vote. Andrea's doing the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Committee Chair Rennie,
Yes.
Committee Vice Chair Elahi,
Yes.
Gibbons,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
Ober. Aye. Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
All right, so now we're on to item number 5 or 6.
5.
We're on, okay, there's nothing there, that's why. All right, yeah, so,
Yeah, so I'll take that.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chair, I have a hard stop at 4, so forgive me if I bow out.
Uh-oh, so do I. So let's get this done, Rob.
okay, quickly.
Yeah. I'm going to actually have the presentation be done by our financial advisor, Michael Bowanger, who is on the call. But I wanted to just tee this up. We've provided an update to the Finance Committee a couple of times on the prepay program. Given all the discussion we've had so far, I mean, you think about our future, there are very few places where CCAs can get a structural cost decrease. This is one of those places where if we invest in a prepay program, we can essentially structurally get our costs at a little lower level. And I just thought it was pretty, it's good timing for us to bring it to you here soon after we talk about the budget. So with that, I'm going to introduce Michael Berwanger, who's been our financial advisor. He was working with us shoulder to shoulder and leading lots of the discussions with Moody's. And he helped us get our credit rating. And now he's helping us and several other CCAs with the prepay program. Mike?
Thanks, Krish. Good afternoon, folks. Nice to meet you virtually, at least. Again, prepayment is you're making a purchase of your energy over the contract term upfront. And why would you do that? Why would you sell bonds today to purchase 20, 30 years of energy? Well, you're selling bonds in the tax-exempt market, and the counterparties that you're working with are borrowing at taxable rates. So there is an arbitrage there that creates an opportunity for you to lower your costs. So the benefits, why would you ever consider this? As Girish alluded to, the bulk of your ongoing costs are related to your power contracts. This is a program specifically targeted at trying to lower the cost of those contracts. When we've looked at this over the last year, the savings are all market dependent, of course, the time that you actually sell the bonds, but the range has been pretty nice. It's been about 8 to 12%, per year. That would be for 30 years on the quantities that are in the prepayment agreement. What does that mean in dollars? For the amounts that we were looking at, which I believe, and Monica, of course, can correct me, about 20% of the portfolio ballpark. That equates out to about $2.5 to $3.5 million a year. And I think on a rate basis, that's about 0.5% to 0.75%. So it's not, it's consequential. It's definitely meaningful. There is a favorable risk allocation in the transaction. Nothing is really changing for what you're doing now. Your contracts dictate that if you receive the energy off of the project, you pay for it. Well, none of that changes. You're not obligated to do anything that you're otherwise already doing. Really, you're just doing it for 10% less. Most meaningful, two things. The debt that you would be selling is not recourse to SVCE. Meaning that if the worst happens and this thing is unraveled, you're not on the hook to repay the bonds. This is unfortunately, this has been tested. There was a transaction back during the financial crisis that was with Lehman Brothers. Anybody following that? They went bankrupt. The entity that had to prepay with Lehman Brothers, it played out exactly how it was supposed to. They were now responsible. They didn't pay any of the debt. The downside to them was all the savings that they were getting went away with it, unfortunately. This is something that is time tested. It's been around since the 90s. The rating agencies are, just as an example, are very comfortable with this. There have been a slew of transactions over the years for natural gas, and folks are looking at it now for energy in the public power space. So just, SMUD has done 3 of these transactions. Roseville, Santa Clara, Modesto, Reading are all in transactions, and SCAPA down south have all participated in these. SCAPA is looking at something now as well. It's very similar to this. So what are the risks? I really want this to be a longer list than the benefits. That is my job. I'm looking for the pinholes, right? So I'm almost embarrassed to say that I don't have more than 2 bullets here, but that is these really are the risks. So if the worst happens, you were saving 10%, you're no longer saving that. So if you've been relying on that in your budget, obviously that could be a problem. You don't have $2 to $3 million to come up with. And you're back to where you were. You're back to square one. It's going to take a lot of time to get done. There's already been a bunch of time spent on this. So you've sort of squandered that investment, so to speak. But again, the biggest item, there's a bunch of bonds outstanding. They don't come back to you. You don't have to pony up to pay the $200 million worth of bonds that are outstanding. So that it really, it's one of these things we're just embarrassed to say. It's a really good opportunity. It's very unique to you. It is part of your competitive advantage for being community oriented and community owned, so to speak. So being a municipal entity allows you to sell tax exempt bonds. That is unique. And, you know, as I've said, others have taken the opportunity to use this as a tool and have saved hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. If we want to flip to the next slide, I know there was a bunch of hard stops, so I'll go through this and then take questions. So what does the timing look like on something like this? You know, I think we're zeroing in on a selection process for some counterparties potentially. You know, the transaction is definitely dependent on a number of moving variables in the interest rate markets, commodity markets. So the opportunities to actually get something done can be episodic. Market opens up, it's there. It could be there for a couple of years, or it could just be there for a couple of months, or just days. So, you know, what we've talked about with staff is, hey, you know, let's get moving. There's a lot of paperwork. You know, it's about a 2-foot high stack of paperwork that has to be negotiated. That can take months. There's a lot of lawyers involved. There's a lot of, you know, tax issues to worry about. So let's invest the time now to get going on that, to put that together, so that at a future date, both this committee as well as the board would have the opportunity to look at it and would be required at that point to go through a full approval process, which would allow you to move on to execution and hopefully years of success. So let's catch what are the costs. You know, the nice thing is most of the costs are contingent on the successful closing of the bond sale, so you're not out of pocket. You know, there are a lot of parties involved here. You have to hire an investment bank to sell the bonds. There's the energy supplier. Could be the same. They could be different. There are at least 3 or 4 or 5 lawyers involved, of course. There's ourselves. There's the rating agencies. Those costs on transactions like this do escalate pretty quickly, but they are payable through the issuance of bonds. So you are not writing a check for $1.5 million ballpark. There are some other smaller out-of-pocket costs that you're looking at right now. So, you know, SVCE in conjunction with a number of other CCAs are looking at creating a JPA conduit issuer. So another entity that's sole purpose would be to issue bonds like these. You know, I think there's a total cost associated with that, and your share, you know, is just about $15,000 that'll be out of pocket now and potentially recouped if a transaction is done. So I went through that at a really fast clip. I apologize. I didn't want to keep anybody, but I'll maybe stop there and see if anybody had any questions.
Any questions?
Just more of the question comment. So every time we look at it, I get to get the paperwork done part of this, but interest rates, everything is upside down for this to make any sense right now. So really this is just an exercise to load the cannon, so when it's time to shoot, we're ready to go.
Correct. You're absolutely right. You could not do this today, unfortunately. Market is absolutely upside down. There's a lot, I'm told there's a lot happening, you know, between now and the end of the year, including apparently a presidential election. So a lot can happen. And we're trying to prepare for, you know, opportunities that might come with some of those events, as we've seen in the past.
Liz?
So I appreciate staff's been bringing us along for a while on this, and I think I actually understand it now. And I'm very supportive of it. Campbell just did bond sales today, and we got a bond rate of 2.36%. So it's definitely a goofy time. Being prepared, I think, is appropriate. Doing it as a JPA, I think, is also appropriate. So I'm supportive of moving forward and recommending that this effort be supported by the board.
Javed?
Yeah, you know, I guess we're in a good market with the interest rates being so low, so it's definitely worth looking into. I just wanted to make sure the contract that we would be signing for the purchase of power would not be tied to the bond issuance itself. These are two separate transactions, or you mentioned that the supplier might also be involved in the issuance. Did I hear that correctly or not?
You heard that correctly. You know, depending upon the path that we choose, there are a number of different ways you could do this. I think the contemplation is that you have your existing contracts effectively go into the structure. So you just need a single entity to kind of you know, coordinate those contracts, if you will, for you. So that's what when I refer to an energy supplier, that's primarily what they would be doing. They could offer some supplemental products along the way as well, but there's it's not like your entire portfolio is shifting. This literally is your portfolio and your contracts.
So it's not like the energy supplier would say, okay, you're going to make an extra 0.5%, so I want to charge you more for that, or I want a part of that pie.
Not in this case. No, you've already you have these contracts. You've already negotiated. You know, you have your price. You're going to just take that, and essentially through this other vehicle, this financial vehicle, you'll be able to cut that price by 10%.
Thank you.
Sure.
Andrea, do we have any participants with hands up, or attendees with hands up?
No, and I did not receive any mailed-in correspondence either.
Okay. So this is just information. You don't need anything from us, correct?
That's correct. Because of the complexity of the transaction, I would like to bring it to the board. And by the way, the other thing here is there are two different transactions. There's the bond conduit that we are doing along with Marin, let's say Monterey, and East Bay and us would be the founding members of the bond conduit. And then East Bay and us we are in the process of actually hiring the professionals. So again, I'd like to bring it as an information item to the board. And so just to keep them up to speed. But I think for action, it's going to come to you in like somewhere, I'd say October is what we're targeting.
Okay.
To hire all the professionals.
So I'll close that item quickly. Move to item
Great, thank you.
6, which is staff is asking us to have our next finance committee after the September 9th Board of Directors meetings. Does anybody have issue with that?
Could I clarify? I assume you mean a date after, not physically after the board.
A date after. Yes.
Great.
That's fine with me.
And one of the main items will be the prepay.
Okay. And so you'll just do a poll, a doodle poll for when we want it. We just here are basically agreeing that yes, after September 9th, it sometime is okay.
Yes, we can do that, or we can decide now.
Can I suggest a doodle poll, because I actually have to leave too, and I think Liz might have just left.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was trying to do it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, but I'm already overdue. And
All right. Thanks, Howard.
Thank you guys. Sorry. Bye.
All right. So you got what you need on that, I guess. That's it, right? We're adjourned.
If there's any comments from the board or staff on future agenda items.
Do they have quorum, Andrea?
No.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
they do. No,
yes,
you
we
do.
do.
Maria's here.
Oh, that's right. We still have Maria.
Yeah, Maria's here.
Yeah.
Good.
Mhm.
Whew.
Yeah. We're good.
You thought you'd get away with it, huh?
Any comments on future agenda items from remaining committee members? Looks like no.
Yeah, I don't have it.
All right. So then I guess we are adjourned. Thank you.